Welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. And in today's episode, I'm joined by Jim Flatt, CEO and co-founder of Brightseed Bio. Now, Brightseed Bio, they're using machine learning and systems biology to map and discover naturally occurring active compounds across the whole of the plant kingdom. These compounds have proven clinical benefits for health and wellness. And Jim knows a thing or two about chemical engineering with a master's and a PhD in chemical engineering, and he's had a super successful career translating bio-based discoveries and products, into commercialization, really working across food, nutrition, specialty chemicals and fuels, mainly as a CTO before co-founding Brightseed 3 years ago. So Jim, welcome to the show. Really glad that you're able to join us today.
Well, Simon, thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon.
It's an absolute pleasure. And I remember lunching with you up in Palo Alto whilst you were going through a kind of transition. And it was at the time, so I remember you had some ideas. This was probably about 6 months before you started the company. And you had some ideas. I was trying to find you a job at the time as a CTO, and you had some ideas, and we touched base. I know you started the company, and 3 years later, you come a long way, Jim.
I think so. Yeah, no, we're both obviously very proud and fulfilled of the mission that we have at Brightseed, which is really to enable a healthier future by illuminating and activating these connections between humans and plants, and happy to share more about the technology, but literally within 3 years, with the support from a number of strong investors and advisors, we built a team of 30, made a number of major discoveries about components, small molecules in edible plants that we think can have an important impact on enabling this healthier future, and then translating those discoveries to products and services, products that we ourselves are developing with a hope to launch our first product within the next 2 years, and services as an innovation partner to the agri-food industry, to many leaders in different sectors of the agri-food business areas, as an innovation partner to help them develop healthier and more sustainable products that consumers increasingly are seeking.
Excellent. Oh, you've been busy. But let's take it all the way back. And, just as you say, as you were growing up, I suppose, what were the major influences for you that really helped shape, the kind of ideas and aspirations of a young Jim Flatt?
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up in California, predominantly in the Bay Area, and probably like many you may speak with, I was heavily influenced by my mom and dad. Both were heavily involved in science and technology. My mom, in particular, was one of the first trained computer scientists of either sex. So not just one of the very few kind of pioneers of female computer scientists, but one of the first computer scientists more generally. My father also was in math and computer sciences, ultimately became a research director at IBM. And so really learned from both of them. It's hard, in a way, hard to escape science and technology with parents like that. But in the San Francisco Bay Area, and with the kind of work my dad was doing, we got exposed to all sorts of really high-end applications around major problems that they were trying to solve with, at that time, mainframe computers. And so we got exposed to some of the first work on satellite imagery and weather modeling. We actually were one of the first homes in the Bay Area to have a remote terminal in the early 1970s to connect in with mainframes. So I learned computer programming very early, and took, basically took jobs late in high school and at university, working as a software developer programmer for some of the startup companies in Silicon Valley that were developing some of the standalone computers and some of the microprocessors that basically fueled, provided the foundation for personal computing.
Well, I mean, your career probably could have gone, well, you could have majored in a number of different directions. I mean, clearly you focused on chemical engineering at that time. So what brought you around to that discipline, for instance?
Yeah, it's as I've always joked with my friends and family, that it would have been very natural for me when I enrolled at MIT to follow a career in software and computer science. But I really became enamored with biology and chemistry at the time. And, with a couple close friends, we sort of, like anything at the time, kind of looked interesting, and decided to take my degree in chemical and then later biochemical engineering. So it really was just kind of enamored with biological processes, and at the time really was sort of taken with the idea that, wouldn't it be cool if we could understand the language of biology and learn how to effectively program cells to produce products that would be of interest and needed. So again, with kind of a predominant interest around health at that time. So,
And I got it. Really interesting. Is yeah, even if I think back to like today now, when you're thinking about some of the work with some of the intersection of computer science, AI, and chemistry and biology, things have really evolved and developed within the industry. So very exciting. And but tell me, when you finish your PhD, for instance, and you went into industry, what were your kind of dreams and goals at that stage? For a career, and what you really wanted to do with your career.
Yeah, so I think, Simon, even when I left MIT, I took my master's at Berkeley, and at that point decided it was a good time to take a break before I plunged into kind of a deep dive discipline for a PhD. So I took basically really took a few years off, worked at Procter and Gamble as a product development and process development engineer. And there at Procter and Gamble really learned the importance of good market research and understanding consumer needs, and therefore and thereby developing products that met those needs. So we got a really good grounding in product development and kind of best practices. But at that time, I think I realized that probably the big company was not the best place for me, or perhaps I did well, but I really kind of sought going back to that environment that I had working for small companies in the Silicon Valley. And I really kind of liked that entrepreneurship, the startup culture. And it was at that point that I knew that I wanted to get into more entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial activities, and in particular wanted to pursue really advanced training in biochemical engineering, biotechnology. So went back, got my PhD at the University of Wisconsin, had two really great mentors there, Ed Lightfoot and Doug Cameron. Ed Lightfoot was really a founding father of chemical engineering, highly respected globally, and Doug was really one of the early pioneers in synthetic biology, and so they both had enormous impacts on me, and that ultimately then led me into a 30+ year career in applied biotechnology.
Right. We've got to thank Doug for that, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. I hear a lot of people that come out of that stable that have
Mm-hmm.
worked with Doug over the years, and have also mentioned really positive things about the influence he kind of played with them.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it though at the time about the smaller, Californian-based startup compared to a Procter and Gamble, do you think?
Well, I think it's a couple things. One, you're really able to own the outcomes of decisions that you make. I think the second piece is just the pace. I really like the fast pace in a smaller company, just in terms of, once you tackle a difficult problem, the ease of which, when you do come to a decision, that you just move out on that decision and work to solve the problem, and literally spending more time solving the problem or coming up with a new product than sort of debating the best possibility. I mean, I recall one of the things at Procter and Gamble, and I, again, have high respect and high regard for what they've done and the training they provided me and many other people. But we often joked at that time that the company would spend a lot of time debating the best idea, for a certain type of product. And if you step back and recognize that probably 4 of those 5 ideas would all have been successful, and sometimes it's better just to close quickly on a good path and move on. And so I was attracted by the small company where you needed to do that, and much in the way, say, if you look at challenges such as mountain climbing, which I've done some, and other endeavors like marathoning, which I've done a lot of, and you're really on your own there, and you have to, you really have to survive through your actions, and there's an excitement to that. I guess there's somewhat of a thrill, but also there's a profound satisfaction that comes when you complete something significant. And I just saw in smaller companies that I felt just a greater satisfaction, because you could you could see the benefits of things you had done, and at the same time, mistakes you made, you also could see those outcomes and then very directly learn from them. So those are some of the appeals. But I guess maybe the final thing in a small company is just the camaraderie that comes with tackling something difficult, and the friendships and experiences that you share on that journey.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that's great. Now, as a CEO, as a CTO, look, you've made your career really.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking through some of the things that you've done. I mean,
yeah,
we could talk for hours about the amount of products you've commercialized, the bio-based novel product you've commercialized. I was going to ask you to maybe give me an example of something that comes to mind for you that's really valuable that you brought to market.
Yeah, well, I think we started research in DHA omega-3s, which are basically produced by microalgae, or single cell simple plants, plant cells generally, that ultimately are a very important, the major lipid in the neural tissue, and responsible again for normal function, normal development, and cognitive development, visual acuity. And it was a fascinating story in the early 90s as we began to understand the role of diet for a force for good or a force for bad with respect to health. And one of the things that I think we started to learn in the early 1990s were how significantly our diet had changed over the past 100 years as we moved from a predominantly agrarian society to now a much faster pace, more industrialized food system, which, trust me, has done many good things in terms of alleviating, not completely, but mostly alleviating malnutrition and issues around insufficient supply of food. But through that, we've actually weaned out a lot of these micronutrients, these including phytonutrients that are basically small molecules that we've evolved around that have important health impact. And one of those was DHA omega-3, where unless you lived in Japan or certain parts of the Mediterranean, most people actually had significantly reduced their consumption of these. And it actually turns out that that had important health and developmental effects. So ultimately, that led me to become head of R&D for Martech Biosciences. And, we brought these products to market, both with our partners, including Mead Johnson, who's now Reckitt Benckiser, Abbott, as well as Nestle, as kind of three leaders in infant nutrition, and brought these products to improve brain and eye development for babies, and ultimately found their way now as a staple in products through development for their role in optimizing really cognitive function. And that for me, I still look at that as one of the most impactful products and most satisfying products. And it really helped shape, I think, many of my ideas as we founded Brightseed, recognizing that there was, if you'll have it, many more of these phytonutrients and micronutrients to discover and develop. I would still say that's probably the most significant product that we brought to market, and it was really a pleasure and an honor to work with a very motivated and talented team to bring those products to market.
Yeah, and they're still very much in the market now. I mean, with DSM and their kind of portfolio and being the leaders, in this type of technology and product as well. It's very very interesting, and that's thanks for sharing that. So tell me, why are 30 years or so leading that commercialization and scale up and technology? Why did you want to become, what were the motivations to becoming a CEO?
So I would say, perhaps unlike some of my university friends who became very successful CEOs, it was never a big aspiration for me. So again, really, it still this day has not been a driving interest, but rather taking on a CEO role now was just sort of the right thing to do at the time to bring Brightseed to fruition. And so back in 2017, when we spoke, I had spent and gotten to know over several years my co-founders, Sophia Elizondo and Lee Che. Sophia is our Chief Commercial Officer, COO, and Lee is our CTO, and both I would say strong business partners and close friends. There's a lot of mutual respect amongst us, but when we had the idea for the company, it was pretty natural how we would sort of assign the roles, and we recognized that probably the work that I had done put me in the best position to provide overall leadership for the company. I had done 2 stints as sort of acting CEO or division president synthetic genomics, and I think that gave me confidence that I could do the role. But as I said, it was not something that I, was angling to do.
Yeah.
It really was just the means to an end, and we felt that the mission of our company, really, was necessary to achieve that.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. And tell me then about Brightseed Bio. Tell me a
Mhm.
little bit about the kind of mission and the vision, and I suppose the real problems that the technology are going to solve.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think as we stated in the opening remarks, we're here to enable a healthier future. There's a growing body of scientific data that's pointing to the importance of diet in health. And in fact, just as an example of one of the major studies that has published in the last couple of years, the Global Burden of Disease study that's done in cooperation with the World Health Organization and funded by the Gates Foundation, found that 1 in 5 deaths across 195 countries in 27 years could be attributed to a poor diet. So again, poor diet was the single leading cause of death, but the study was, I think, even more profound in the other aspect where it really illuminated what about our diet was deficient or poor. And contrary to sort of popular belief in the industry, it actually turns out that over consuming the bad things such as excess sodium, excess added sugar or trans fats, those things, while definitely are not good to consume in excess, actually were more minor contributors. It actually turns out that diets deficient in the whole fruits, vegetables, nuts, and grains that are rich sources of these small molecules that we call phytonutrients. Actually, those underconsumption was 3 times more deadly than over consuming the bad stuff. So, the real takeaway, I think, for the industry, and again, this is backed by a number of other studies, is that we need to increase our consumption of these health beneficial phytonutrients. And if you think about it, it's kind of a common sense, it's sort of intuitive. If we evolved around a predominantly plant-based diet, and then we changed that diet, we've now removed something, and what we've removed are these phytonutrients that are really the primary reason why the plant-based diet is better for you in terms of association with longer life as well as a healthier life. So we also know that from an economic perspective that we just can't afford continue to have a healthcare system that's been characterized by some as a sick care system. We spend 70% of our 70% of healthcare costs in developed countries are associated with not curing, but just managing chronic diseases such as diabetes, liver disease, cardiovascular diseases that are all or predominantly due to poor lifestyle and including a poor diet. So therefore, these diseases that we're spending so much money on are largely preventable. And then finally, if science and economics weren't enough reason, actually consumers increasingly get it and are seeking to improve their health. And this was a trend that was occurring, ramping up even before COVID, and now with COVID, you see just a burst of interest in terms of looking at how we improve our resilience. And so Brightseed is really centered on that problem in terms of how do we make the benefits of a plant-based diet more accessible by identifying at a molecular level these phytonutrients that are critical, and then developing different products around that and different ways to enable consumers to get to improve their health, and of course that will have benefits for their overall health and longevity. And again, we think in the future is going to be a foundation for transition in health. How we approach healthcare.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for that. I mean, it sounds like a real novel kind of mission. And I suppose what excites you most about the journey?
Uh, it's learning something new every day. I mean, it is, and I think we talked a little bit earlier about just the pace of a small company. On any given day, we learn new things about some of the effects of some of these phytonutrients in plants and their potential role in different health conditions such as cognitive health, metabolic health, immune health, digestive health, and bone and muscle health. 5 areas that consumers are interested in. And literally I would say seemingly every day there's some new insights. And so it is really exciting to see that. Secondly, I think then there is, of course, though, making a discovery is one thing. It's quite another to translate it to a successful product. And that, while our Forager intelligence greatly accelerates that process of discovery and translation to a product, you're still looking at 3 to 4 years, possibly 5 years to take a discovery and get it to market. And that's because there are just a lot of things one has to do in terms of finding an economical source for the product, developing a process to get a more concentrated form, to ensure that the process and product itself are safe, and to prove out the benefits of the products. And so that's a long journey. And I think I like kind of like a marathon. You can't get overly excited by early good results, because you may encounter some challenge later in the race. So you just have to take the long view on it. But I think the important thing, like in marathoning, you learn that, hey, don't think about the end of the race, don't get fixated there, just think about getting through the next mile and the next milestone. And if you do that, eventually you realize, oh, I'm a couple of miles from the finish, and now I can think about the finish line and I can make it. So I think really that is the main thing that I enjoy. And then of course, with that, associated with that, is seeing a lot of our younger professional team members who are taking on big responsibilities that they've not had and in the past, and seeing them step up and frankly helping and mentoring them to take on that responsibility, and seeing the joy and satisfaction that comes that they experience when they've done something important and significant. That is another thing that is really a constant brings a smile on my face. Because I look at this stage of my career, it's really about ultimately, and in addition to building a company that will have a big impact and sustain, for generations to come, hopefully, it's also really about enabling the next generation of scientists, engineers, and business leaders to to have their own big impacts.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's lovely as well, Jim. It really is. So there are a couple of things you mentioned there. Let's maybe start with the discovery side. It would be lovely to hear a little bit more about the technology. Just if you could outline for us kind of what technology does, for instance.
Yeah, so we created a artificial intelligence called aptly named Forager to do three things. First, to discover many of these unknown compounds in plants that potentially could have these beneficial effects. we estimate that over 99% of these compounds have yet to be discovered. So in essence, Forager, like a Google search engine, creates an index of these plants. And I'll talk in more detail about the approaches that we use, but that's the first thing Forager does. The second question that Forager helps to answer is, what good are these compounds and what is their role in human health and development? And so there we've built a digital model of human health, modeling about 600 or so biological targets linked to 5 major health conditions that I'd already mentioned, that are of great importance from a health perspective, that are great interest from a consumer unmet need perspective. And so with these models that we build, we're able to make predictions into our growing plant library of compounds, of compounds that are present in our diet, which potentially could have benefits. And then when we've eventually identified, and we do this pretty quickly often, we test through different cell culture and in vitro assays that we've validated that some of these compounds have the desired activity and therefore likely to have the desired health benefit. We can then find the best sources of those using a body of omics data and knowledge of evolutionary relationships of plants. So it's really those 3 questions. What are these compounds? Why are they interesting and useful? And when we've identified good things, what are the best and most economical sources? And so ultimately, this very powerful system allows one to make new discoveries and translate them to an economical solution, really at a fraction of the time and cost. So we're making these discoveries in months, for hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment, rather than, multiple years and many millions of dollars of investment that they've typically taken. And so this is really how AI is transforming, this industry. And so, with it, AI is only useful if you have one, a clear learning objective, which I've described, and secondly, if you have copious or sufficient amounts of data from which to, train and build models that allow you to get these insights. And so with this, we generate, for example, a large amount of data on these new plants, on edible plants, things that we've known. So take our work with Danone that Danone has talked about pretty extensively, where we're actually using the Forager AI system to gain new insights about the potential benefits of soy, basically new prospective health benefits that around which they can build new stories, and to gain a much deeper understanding of the supply chain and understanding the differences between soy grown in different regions of the world, and ultimately their role in health, and how ultimately they can develop more differentiated products taking advantage of those benefits. And so, plants are products of the environment, right? Just as we are. And so anyone who drinks wine knows that a grape grown in one region of the world that is genetically identical to a grape grown in another part of the world doesn't always taste the same. That's because these plants express different levels of these phytochemicals that not only influence taste, but they actually influence the overall potential benefit for those plants in health. And so through Forager, we can identify those differences and learn how to take advantage of them to create new and better products.
That sounds great. Tell me, what this technology, how long has it been around for? I mean, if we were having this chat 15 years ago, could you have done this back then, or?
Absolutely not. Yeah, no, so It's really requires several things. So going back to the, kind of foundations or sort of essential requirements for AI, they include having the learning objectives, which existed 15 years ago. But what we didn't have is the equipment in a way, or the knowledge to generate a sufficient body of data, nor did we really actually even have the computing power to deal with the data we have. So in the case of developing a proprietary database of these plant small molecules, that's effectively our library. It really requires pairing very advanced instrumentation to help identify these compounds, coupled with proprietary algorithms that we've developed using AI to train to process the kind of noisy raw data that we get to help identify, get a much deeper profile of compounds. And so we oftentimes can find 5 to 10 times the number of compounds that were previously known about any given source, whether it be soy or a superfruit, or pick your favorite plant of interest. And that, of course, then gives us the potential to have a much deeper understanding about what that plant is able to do and its potential role in health. So though that instrumentation didn't exist, nor did the computing power really exist 15 years ago to process the data. So that's an example of just how, this really was, you need this enabling environment to make a Brightseed happen.
Yeah, no, got it. So let's just say, for instance, you identify you've identified through forage a phytonutrient you're really interested in, but it's in it might be in a fruit or a plant that's not really accessible. How do you then, but you really want to develop it? What do you do at that stage to, right?
Yeah, and so that's really the third element of Forager, where we're able to effectively digitally scan the potential of up to 30,000 edible plants that have a supply chain. Again, there's plants are very diverse, and while we probably focus on, the world has agriculture is focused on like 15 plants. There actually are many different plants that represent important parts of the food chain globally. So through the methodology that we developed, we're able to make pretty accurate predictions about the metabolic capacity of those plants and which plants are then might be potentially good sources. So out of many of those plants, we can then down select to plants that we think have potential that we should test out. So for example, with our first phytonutrient that plays an important role in improving metabolic health, which of course now is top of mind with COVID. We were able to, in less than a year's time, identify about 80 plant sources, and we went from fairly low concentrations to finding, in fact, 2 plant sources that could produce the phytonutrient at what we believe to be economical levels. And so, that's a process that normally would have taken many years and oftentimes wouldn't have succeeded. But with this power, we're able to quickly answer the question, hey, is there an economical source? Now, we may come up with some discoveries that for which there's not an economical plant source, and then we can look at other methods to produce the product, including by synthetic biology. So we do, as we build our patent estate around these discoveries, we do look forward towards second generation methods to produce the products. But I think it's important that the approach that we're taking really aligns with the consumer's interests. Increasingly natural, authentic products that are healthier and more sustainable. We've always believed that the most powerful answers reside in nature, and that's why we've created this artificial intelligence to really help examine quickly the possibilities in nature.
And that sounds great. And so this first product that you're bringing to market,
Mhm.
as you've mentioned, to deal with the phytonutrient, to deal with metabolic disorders, right? That's the first
Correct.
product. That will be, well, when will that be estimated to be in the market? And will that be, is it through a kind of over the counter? Is it
Mhm.
through a food? Is it through a nutritional kind of supplement?
Yeah, so it will be, we hope to get this product to market in the 2022 timeframe. We've already scaled up the product to produce it at a commercial scale. We now have to complete the regulatory authorizations, and we are just beginning to initiate our first human clinical studies to prove out the benefits. So we'd like to have this product with the backing of human clinical data, because again, that is part of the brand promise that we make with Brightseed to the consumers, that these are products that will have real benefit, and that's ultimately the foundation for sustainable product. Like DHA omega-3, which is a great example, we see the potential to offer that in different forms for different market segments, both as a dietary supplement for some in a more concentrated form, as hopefully an ingredient that can be added to certain types of foods to create these plussed up or functional foods. And then, of course, potentially it can have use in higher concentrations in certain types of medical foods or specialized nutritional products for people that would have more, severe or problematic health conditions. But generally, the whole premise here is how do we prevent, or I would say more likely, how do we reduce the risk that people develop these debilitating chronic health conditions by helping to restore these phytonutrients to their diet. And of course, then finally, we can use this information in the longer term to help guide consumers to specific whole food health choices that may be really advantageous for them. So while in the short term we're focused on these, making these phytonutrients more accessible, I think there will be a growing business in just helping identify whole foods that are particularly good and can provide different options for consumers to ultimately eat a healthier diet that really is paired with their specific genetic makeup.
Yeah, no, great. It sounds super exciting. Tell me, you mentioned earlier about your two co-founders, Sophia and me. I was going to ask you, well, what makes when you've got three people co-founding, what makes someone a great co-founder?
Well, I think at the end of the day, great co-founders, like building a great company, starts with a strong foundation. It's kind of like building a house. So, your house is only going to survive as long as you have a solid foundation. And so, in this case, a couple of aspects make a great co-founder, and the first is high degree of trust amongst the three of us, deep mutual respect, basically for the capabilities that we each bring, and again having complementary skills that are necessary. A lot of companies, and in fact the majority of companies, some successful, some not, do just start with a singular founder with a vision and an idea, but oftentimes that's necessary, of course, but not sufficient to translate that vision to a set of successful products and a successful business. And we believe a strength of ours is bringing kind of this collective, these complementary experiences to build, to make discoveries, develop the products, and translate them to successful market opportunities. So Liche is our CTO, really is the architect of our Forager platform, and both developing and continuing to advance the AI Forager AI platform, but also increasingly solving and showing with many partners how it can solve their problems. And that's absolutely essential. Under Lee, we also have built out a strong product and process development teams of, again, food scientists and engineers and chemists who can translate those discoveries to a real product and an economical process. And then, of course, Sophia is our really leading our commercial efforts, really helps guide our strategy, kind of identifying, which of the problems are really worth solving, how we develop how we develop solutions that are going to meet consumer needs, and increasingly how do ourselves and how do we help our partners message the benefits of those products, because again, the regulatory constructs for both in the EU and the US are, I would say, fairly behind where the science and consumer interests are. We sort of treat food as just simply basic nourishment, and when we talk about health, that means kind of pharmaceuticals and therapeutics, basically active disease treatment. And the science, of course, is showing that we need to think about health as a continuum. So how do we come forward and give consumers accurate information, but that stay within the bounds of these sort of regulatory guardrails? And that's I would say a challenge that we're working through and helping our partners work through. So I think hopefully you can see how the experiences that each bring are really necessary for that spectrum of discovery, development, and translating to a successful product. And
yeah, absolutely. The final question, just your dreams and hopes for the company. Were you thinking, you've closed your recent round of funding a few months ago. I know you've got some wonderful investors and board advisors. When you think longer term for this business, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so I think sort of near term are getting our first product to market, as I said, within the next 2 years, and having that be a success. Secondly, developing now basically a compelling pipeline of other phytonutrients that, again, can help address some of these unmet needs. Third is developing more strategic partnerships with global leaders like Danone, so that we've got a very powerful platform, and how do we bring the benefits of this platform to companies with the vision and scale, such as a Danone has, for example, to really, I think, meet consumers' needs, growing needs for these healthier products, and help them, of course, in the long term financially. So that's really kind of near term, and we hope that will lead us to kind of cash flow positive operations in the next few years. We don't want to make fundraising as a means to an end. And with that, we brought on some great investment partners such as Horizons Ventures, Continental Grain, Seed to Growth Ventures, and most recently Lewis and Clark Agri-Food. But at the end of the day, we don't want to be a company that's having to raise hundreds of millions of dollars, and we don't need to. We'd rather develop a profitable business. And long term, our vision, though, is really to build the foundation for a personalized health platform. And I think you can see, understand how by developing and validating kind of gaining and understanding at the molecular level of these connections between humans and plants, we really can help inform services, products and services for both helping manage, healthcare organizations deliver healthcare more proactively at a fraction of the cost. And perhaps even then work at a consumer level, perhaps pairing as software for digital health products, and including health wearables, where we can increasingly gain a sense of how our daily health condition and how we're functioning on a daily basis. But right now we lack really precise, actionable recommendations to improve something. So if we see that we're not sleeping as well, for example, what are the changes that are going to work for me that I can make to help improve that, so I feel better rested and I'm more productive the following day? That's ultimately what we're building towards. And you can't do that immediately, but we're building the foundation for that. And that's really where I'd like to, see that the company can have really profound impact on the future of health.
Wow, that sounds very aspirational, very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So, look, Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much. Really enjoyed the conversation, and wish you and Brightseed Bio the best of fortune for the future.
Great. Simon, again, thank you for your interest. And it was very fun to talk about all of this with you. So have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.